Thank you. Thanks to C. Stonebrager Martinez and Mark Alvarado of the Interreligious Task Force on Central America and Colombia for crafting the statement. And also to Rob Rice of the Committee of 500 Years for ensuring the accuracy of the statement. This is not a land acknowledgement. An acknowledgement often states that we should remember the indigenous inhabitants of a place as if they are no longer in existence, no longer living in resistance to colonization and empire, no longer in reciprocal relationship with the land and all of its inhabitants, two-legged, four-legged, rooted, and otherwise. No longer teaching that we are all not meant to be apart from nature, but that we are each a part of nature. This is not a land acknowledgement. In the traditions of the indigenous people of Turtle Island and Abayala, we offer instead a welcome. Welcome to the Great Lakes Cuyahoga River watershed. Indigenous peoples are not ancient history, but are still here, still existing, resisting, and protecting our most sacred relations, including the stewardship of Mother Earth, also known as Pachamama, Madre Tierra Abayala, Turtle Island. Though the federal government refuses to recognize that tribes in this state, though the federal government refuses to recognize any tribes in this state, these are unceded lands, home of the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois Confederacy, Ofo, Saponi, Tutelo, Catawba, Shawanaki, Wyandotte, Lenape, Mohican, Kickapoo, Miami, Mississauga, Kaskaskia, the Anishinabeg Confederacy, Muscatoon, Neutral, and Erie. Hundreds of tribes and over 100,000 natives call Ohio home. Thank you all. I'm Don Bryant, president of Cleveland Peace Action, longtime board member, and I serve on the Continuations Committee of Labor and Community for an Independent Party, and I'm a coordinating committee member of the Ohio Poor People's Campaign. I welcome you to the Midwest UN Decades Reparations Organize the South Solidarity Tour meeting. With Cleveland Peace Action, we organize educational and commemorative events. We organize rallies with partners and join rallies and marches. We visit congressional offices, congressional members' offices. We send out email alerts for legislative actions. We contact the media and we write opinion pieces and letters to the editor, to our local media. And of course, we're trying to be visible on social media as much as possible. We adhere to some community programming that specifically speaks to tonight's program. So in 2022, we had a settler colonialism series, talking about the erasure of indigenous peoples from the USA, Turtle Island, to Palestine. We had first up Mazen Kamsia. He's the author of Sharing the Land of Canaan and Popular Resistance in Palestine, the History of Hope and Empowerment. He's a Palestinian scientist, author, founder, and director of the Palestinian Museum of Natural History and the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability at Bethlehem University, where he is a professor. The second part of the series, acclaimed historian Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz discussed her book, Not a Nation of Immigrants, Settler Colonialism, White Supremacy, and a History of Erasure and Exclusion. She also wrote Indigenous Peoples' History of the U.S. Frank Joyce was our moderator for the evening, and he did bring up a couple points to Ms. Ortiz after her talk, and he did say that white people believe that we are entitled to the land, and asked where that comes from. And Ortiz answered with, well, there's a reinvention of white supremacy motives, as with such movies like a movie called Hamilton, which I never saw, but we know what that's about. One of our settler colonial ancestors here. She said her next book will be on Christian nationalism. I also work with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and Cleveland Peace Action has partnered with Poor People's Campaign for mobilizations from Ohio State House to the U.S. Capitol, which will be going again on June 29th. On the Russia-U.S. Conflict in Ukraine, this is actually the U.S.-NATO-Russia conflict that's landed in Ukraine. Cleveland Peace Action always pushes for diplomacy and to curb NATO, pull back from the borders of Russia. And we hear Biden saying that Vladimir Putin won't talk to us. Don't tell me that. Diplomacy's number one. Bombs are way down at the end of the options, and that's the way it should be. Not in such a nation as this imperialist USA. One of our great crowning achievements was to bring in Noura Erakat in 2018 with her new book, Justice for Some, Law and the Question of Palestine. Noura Erakat is an attorney with Georgetown University and others, and she's a pretty amazing speaker and very intellectual. She talks about how the laws that Israel has created to oppress the Palestinian people have always been tweaked for the colonizer to keep the oppression going. And that's a good discussion to have, and it's an important book to read. We brought a whole mess of people in that year, and I was so proud of our group. We had a lot of partners too. Okay, and I want to let you know that our recent annual meeting was with Father John Deere and his book, Gospel of Peace, Matthew, Mark, and Luke from the Perspective of Nonviolence. He's a well-known teacher and voice for peace and nonviolence. In 2008, Archbishop Desmond Tutu nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, calling him the embodiment of a peacemaker. Father Deere's recent address, he spoke of Dr. King's prophetic guidance to us that we must choose nonviolence or face non-existence, ever pertinent today and prevalent, especially today, in today's world, prevalent with the wars that our country is embarking upon, and saber rattling with China and Russia and others. Speaking of Dr. King, well, we did, for our fourth year in a row, Cleveland Peace Action partners with many local groups to conduct an oration of Dr. King's speech Beyond Vietnam, Breaking the Silence. And this is his 1967 April 4th speech, a year to the day before he was assassinated. And this is the speech that calls out war, racism, and militarism as the evils that plague our nation. This year, we partnered with Cleveland Metro School District. Gail Gaddison and Elizabeth Nelson brought us many speakers from their Cleveland schools. And I'm going to finish up. And we did one more program right before October 7th with the new genocide that has been the continuation of the Nakba of Palestine. We brought in Mazen Kamsia one more time. He was on a tour with his wife, Jessie Chang, for the PIBS, the Palestine Biodiversity Center. And we called this program Decolonize Our Minds, Land and Environment. And we brought in Philip Yenyo of American Indian Movement of Ohio and Council on American Islamic Relations, Fatin O'Day, to help us with that program. And then finally, we've been concentrating on these things we call Community Circle, these events, Community Circle around Gaza, which brings in the community to talk about the struggles here and the struggles in Palestine and how they intersect. Networking with community is primary, of course. And one last statement I'd like to say, people say, well, how are you going to pay for reparations for African Americans? Hey, cut the Pentagon, call it a bomb and we'll pay for it. Bombs always get paid for, right? Thank you very much. I'll pass. Have a good night. Thank you.
Done?
Yes, you want me to introduce our next speaker?
Well, the speakers list is myself, Kim Poole, and is it Jad Oglesby from Case Western?
Mm-hmm.
So we have three speakers that I know about following you, and each of us are given 10 minutes each. And George, before you start my time, let me just acknowledge how grateful we are to Don Bryant for accepting this role of moderator to host the Ohio stop of the tour, the Midwest UN Decade Reparations organized the South Solidarity Tour. And it looks like we have a nice sizable group of lots of folks I don't know. So would you please drop your name, your organization, and your location in the chat? And I do want to give special thanks to George Friday. George Friday is a lifetime member of the Southern Anti-Racism Network and a long-time peace activist. She staffs Peace Action North Carolina, as well as United for Peace and Justice, the nationwide coalition of about 200 organizations. And George Friday is the Zoom coordinator for SARN, and she will be telling each of us when we have 5 minutes left, and then when we have 2 minutes left of our 10 minutes. So Kim and Jad, please watch for that. And so thank you, George. And now, George, you can start my time for the 10 minutes.
May I introduce you, Teresa?
Well, I'll introduce myself as
Go
part
for
of my 10 minutes. In the way of further introduction, I'm a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and I see several of my sisters here from San Jose, from Baltimore, from Southport, North Carolina, and Tucson. And so I'm glad to see other WILF members in the call, because unfortunately, the Cleveland branch of WILF kind of went out of business recently. And one of the strategic objectives of having this stop in Ohio is to try to revive the Ohio branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom.
Recording in progress.
George, is something wrong with the recording?
No, someone just joined the call and it says recording in progress when someone joins.
Okay. Well, I got my start with WILF in the late 80s when I was in Cleveland as an organizer. And the branch at that time of WILF was organized and led by Ione Biggs and Kathleen Gathers. And so I'm sure Don is nodding his head. He remembers the incomparable Ione Biggs and Kathleen Gathers. And for many, many years, I thought WILF was a Black women's organization. And I moved to North Carolina in 1998, and I discovered not so much. But what George and I have been doing in WILF is recruiting as many new members in the South as possible. So George and I have started several branches and restarted branches in the South, the Metro Atlanta branch, the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, where I am the organizer in Columbus, Georgia. And we have the Southern Piedmont branch, and we've been recruiting members to the, I believe it must be 90 years old now, the Triangle branch in the Chapel Hill, Carrboro area. And we also restarted the DMV branch or the DC branch, of which Kim Poole is a member, and that's DC, Maryland, Virginia. So we do want to encourage people at this important point in time where we have wars everywhere, and the danger of the war that Israel is waging against Gaza, if the danger of it spreading is upon us. But I do want to say that the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom supports the UN decade and reparations. At the Triannual Congress in July of 2022, George Friday and I, representing the Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus inside of the US section of WILF, we did a workshop, and we asked that the international WILF, with all of the 50 plus sections around the world, with 19 sections in Africa, sections all over Europe, sections in Canada, Costa Rica, Mexico, and points in South America and the Philippines. WILF is an international women's peacemaking organization. And at that international Congress, WILF adopted the UN decade for people of African descent resolution. And George is going to share that on the screen. George, do you have the resolution? It would be great if there's a link.
Yes, but I have to find it. It's gotten
Well,
lost.
it would be great if there if you could put the link in the chat. But the UN decade for people of African descent calls for recognition, justice, and development. And the decade began in January of 2025. And this is the last year of the decade, 10 years. And many people haven't heard much about it. But around the world, people of African descent have been calling for reparations, particularly in the Caribbean area. And in the United States, many reparations ordinances have been passed. Asheville, North Carolina, Evanston, Illinois, Durham, North Carolina, and it's happening so fast in the last couple of years, it's hard for me to keep up with all of the reparations ordinances. But when George finds the UN decade resolution, we can probably read not all of the therefores, but what all of the sections of WILF around the world are charged to do. So when we have the Triennial Congress in July of 2025, next year, all sections are called to report what have you done in the 3 years in support of the UN decade. Thank you, George.
This isn't it.
There's done. Well,
There
at
it is.
any rate, oh yeah, supporting the International Decade for People of African Descent. So it gives the background and lots. And so, George, if you could scroll down to what we're charged to do. Yes, and the framework is, stop, George, the UN Declaration and Program of Action. If people remember, in 2001, the Durban Conference in South Africa, where Israel walked out and the US followed because the Palestinians were there for their rights. and everyone supported the Palestinians on the Black side. So the Durban 400 at that special meeting against racism and all forms of discrimination was important. But George, if there's a link that you could put in the chat for the resolution that was passed at the 33rd International World Congress. And so, George, you can take it down now, because I want to spend the remainder of my time talking about why there is an important need to organize the South. I was a union organizer in 1986 when I arrived in Cleveland. And Karen Nussbaum, who some of you in Cleveland I'm sure know, she's the founder of 9 to 5, the National Association of Working Women. Well, all the while I was a member in the late 70s and early 80s, I kept saying to Karen, you need a union, because I was working at the phone company and I had a union, CWA 3204. And lo and behold, Karen started District 925, the numbers, District 925 and 84. And she recruited me to come to Cleveland to organize the Cleveland Public Library. And I said, Karen, we need unions in the South. She said, no, too hard, right to work. And so I moved all the way from Atlanta to Cleveland, Ohio. And my first campaign was the Cleveland Public Library, wall to wall, from the librarians to the custodians and everything in between. In December 1986. So the Cleveland Public Library maintains this union to this day, I understand. And so it was that first year I became a union organizer that I met the Black Workers for Justice at a labor notes conference. And it was an amazing labor notes conference in Durban in November of 1986. And the issue was Black workers. And so there were Black workers organizations from all over the country. And when I met the Black Workers for Justice, they were only 5 years old, founded in 1981. And I just heard these things I'd never heard before. Democratic rank and file control unions. And it saved me from becoming a bureaucrat because I lived my union life fighting for democratic rank and file control unions, which is why SEIU finally fired me. They fired me for standing up for the Boston's city hospital workers who were trying to keep their hospital from being privatized. That was in 1997 when SEIU said, you're fired. And they felt bad about firing me, folks. So they gave me $15,000 to go away and never come back, never seek employment with SEIU. And I moved back south to Durham, North Carolina. And in 1998, a year after getting fired, we formed the Southern Anti-Racism Network. So we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. We had our founding conference at Highlander Center in 1999 in June on my birthday weekend. So my commitment to organizing the South is until I die. And I want to say to the UAW, don't give up because the campaign at Mercedes in Alabama a few days ago, it ended with a vote count of 2,663 to 2,045. But Mercedes beat down on the workers with captive audience meetings and everything, but still over 2,000 workers voted for the union. And what I learned from the Black Workers for Justice is how to form a minority union when something like that happens. So I hope that the UAW does not desert those 2,000 plus workers who said they wanted a union, because they can start acting like a union right now in the workplace, and eventually they will win over the other ones who were too scared to vote yes. And so we say to the UAW, stand with the workers who voted for the union at the Mercedes plant. Now, I want to show a newspaper article from the 1990 Midwest tour, which was supported by Labor Notes, giving us their list of subscribers. And so that tour started out in Pittsburgh, and then it went to Detroit, then Chicago, Milwaukee, and the final stop, we swung back into Cleveland, where I lived. And so there's the article. You can see my picture. And the article was written by Dick Peary, who's in the meeting today. And he's plain dealer reporter, Dick Peary. And he did that wonderful article. And the article is archived with my papers at Duke University Special Libraries. So if you want to know more about me, just Google Teresa Elamine Papers, and you'll see that my papers are at Duke University. When Duke asked me for my papers, when I left Durham to move to Georgia, I was like, I'm just a community organizer, just a labor community. And they started talking about what I'd done with the anti-sweatshop work, et cetera. So I gave them boxes upon boxes of stuff. So when you Google Teresa Elamine Papers, you can see all the papers and all of the movements that I'm committed to, including Free Palestine, including Free Mumia. And so we must continue to work for the freedom and the liberation from capitalism, imperialism, patriarchy, and white supremacy. That's my commitment. And thank you for listening. And Kim Poole, I am so glad you're here. The wonderful young Kim Poole, who is an international traveler, and she should introduce herself further. And love you too so much, Kim. And Kim just recently came back from the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent in Geneva. So she's going to give us a report on the next phase of decades for people of African descent. Thank you, Kim, and welcome. Glad you could be here. Thank you, Kim.
Teresa, if it's okay, I could go ahead and introduce her.
No, there's no need for that. She can speak for herself. There she goes.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest.
In freedom cannot rest. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mother sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons.
Welcome, everyone.
We who believe in
Wherever you came from, we're really excited that you're here. And as Kim knows, we really want this to be a home for not just for WILF members, but for activists anywhere who are fighting for the same same issues of equality that we're fighting for. So we're here at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which is WILF for short. We're a really old organization, or we prefer to refer to it as a movement, started by women activists, but these days, you know, we also have men, we have intersex, you know, we're an inclusive movement. And we're basically working for peace, but when we talk about peace, it's really from a feminist point of view. So we look at feminist peace as something that really needs to attend to the root causes of violence. All of the issues of inequality that you're also working on and that brought you here to Geneva. We refer to them as systems of oppression. We look at how all of these systems of oppression are really interlinked. WILF at the core works a lot on anti-militarism and on demilitarization. But of course, as those of you who work, for Black women, for example, will know that it affects people in different ways, and that is very linked to other issues like racism, white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy. So these are all the kind of things that we're really trying to connect with different movements and connecting the dots between the issues. Like another aspect is, of course, environmental justice. So that's another piece that we're just trying to bring it back to, you kind of peace unless you address these fundamental issues. So I just wanted to share that with you and welcome you in.
All of these systems from the inside out. I am thankful that you hosted us today. This is just a small window into the type of support that WILF offers to activists, artists, and peace builders around the world. And so thank you again. We're going to snack. And before I introduce Dr. Akil Kalifani, I just want to make sure that we all join. We are the rhythm people. In the beginning was heart drum. With this vibration, we gave rhythm to the world. On this beat, we sing life. We are the rhythm people. And so this is your opportunity.
I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I'm the founding director of Asian People in Prison Human Rights Campaign. What we have today here, when Kim is talking about, and she's framing in culture genocide, anytime you have a people that's been enslaved, taken from their mother Africa, from one continent to another, and then they're on the plantations, and then you have racialized laws, and this is all to invisibilize their humanity. Mm-hmm. This is to take their memory of who they were and who they are to become. And so prison is one of the effects, the affects of white supremacy racism. And so if you have generations of people over time who are constantly being incarcerated, what you do is you begin to forget, right? This is an attack and assault on the memory, but also this is an attack on the soul of the African woman's womb, anything that comes out of her womb. It has been decimated, it has tried to be destroyed, it has been assaulted. And so the work we do, we work to get people out of prison who've been in 30, 40, 50, 64 years. We have 3 generations of men and women in one family incarcerated in the same prison. Grandfathers, fathers, sons. This is normal. We have 2 million people incarcerated, over half of them look like me. It's important that we do this work because for our people incarcerated in prison, this is genocide. These folks are incarcerated so long that they cannot be produced. And so we bring our case to the world stage. Here this week we're at the third permanent forum of African descent, and we're saying that no more will the children of Mother Africa be incarcerated, no more will they be confined. Sorry. I get emotional when I come to these types of international spaces. I have my people here all the way from the diaspora. We're talking about this because you can still feel the spirits. They haunt us, our people who was in these chains, who jumped over the ships, who was on the plantations, and their children today continue to be chained. And so we must continue this fight. Our people, we must free them. And so this prison system is a part of the militarization, the industrial complex of what we see there. And this is about power. This is about an oppression of power, a stoppage of power, containment of power, because the African woman gave the world civilization. And so anything that comes out of her womb, if you can incarcerate, put chains around her womb, then we can be stopped, but we will not be stopped. And this is why it's so important, as Kim sings that song, We believe in freedom. We cannot rest. It's important that we sing that song. We send the vibrations and rhythms up to the ancestors. We send them up to the spirits, and then we bring them into the room right now. George Jackson. We bring him into the room. Ella Fitzgerald, Ella Bay. We bring him into the room. El Haj Malik Shabazz. We bring him into the room. We bring him into the room. We bring all these people into the room. Huey Newton, we bring them into the room. We bring them into the room. We bring them into the room because we're saying that they're saying we have not finished our work. We have not finished our work. We have not finished our work. We want our children to be free. We want freedom for them right now, and it will get done. And so that's what brings us here today. And so what's our next assignment? To not stop. Delegation. Trust me, you can't change anything without causing some degree of disruption. It's impossible. That's exactly what change is. Some people are uncomfortable with the disruption that change causes, but disruption is necessary if anything is going to change. This is speaking by Afeni Shakur, who died in 2016. She served 2 years in prison. At that time when she was arrested, Tupac Shakur was in her belly. He served 9 months in prison. He died in 1996. His stepfather, Dr. Mutulu Shakur, served 35 years in prison. He died in 2023. Today I deliver this in the ancestors' name of the Shakur family, all decimated by white supremacy, racism, mass incarceration, and systems of oppressions. And yet, they were disruptors. And so today, those that sit around me, the children of Mother Africa, this will be our challenge. Can we become disruptors enough to bring back our liberation, to give us self-determination? And so I go ahead and I deliver our expectations, our recommendations, and our demands. We want the United Nations to appoint a special rapporteur on Black women of African descent. We want a special rapporteur appointed on Black African descent of maternal health. We want the United Nations to create a United Nations Permanent Forum on Black African descent on maternal health, a United Nations Permanent Forum on Black women, and a United Nations Permanent Forum on Haiti. It will no longer be accepted how the Haitians continue to live in such deplorable, dehumanized conditions. They owe the West nothing, and yet the West owes them everything. They owe the West nothing, and yet the West owes them everything. Our instructions for the UN Permanent Forum members, you are to issue a press conference, a statement condemning the U.S. mass incarceration as genocide. Mass incarceration to people of African descent in the U.S. is genocide. We cannot reproduce. This comes out of slavery, 13th Amendment. These are the children of Mother Africa that are incarcerated, and we will not tolerate this anymore. My final recommendation, UN Permanent Forum, you will issue a statement, a conference, and you will ask, demand for the release of Iman Jamil Alameen, aka H-Rap Brown, immediately to be released and returned to his people. I deliver the statement in the name of the Shakur family. Peace and blessings.
You go, sis. You go.
Most of us will die in this work, doing this work. So that's all.
And such hard work it is as well.
It is, and we do need allies, though. We do need that support. I kind of piggyback off of you, Daquan. Like, we have to have that. We have to have everyone, right? Mm-hmm. We all have to understand humanity and understand it's just basic common courtesy. Like, I'm in birth work. All we're asking is to live. We just want the baby to live, right? That's basic. Give us the same opportunity to live, to come in this earth, just like anyone else. It's basic. We're not asking for a whole bunch of anything, but it is just basic. So that's it. That's all. I really wanted to put that emphasis on, yes, we need allies, but we need more allies, because now that organization completely dissolved. After COVID, it's not even a thing. If you go research it now, you can't find it. But this was something we're so passionate about. To raise $900,000 in mutual funds.
Yeah. where they used them.
It was yeah. It really. I mean, I was on the leadership team, so yes, we made sure it was. You didn't even have to fill out an application. It wasn't if you needed the money, if you needed the item, it was given to you. So yeah, I said all that to say like it really is very disheartening to be a part of a movement that died down once people could go back to the regular scheduled program.
Well, in Wilf, we're concerned with sustainability as well. Wilf has been around for over 115 years, but we knew it has survived all that long because there have been new generations taking over and changing the movement along the way. And every time it changes, there are these frictions and these kinds of, and so we always
No, I wish I could sleep some of this time, but
are ensuring,
I could rest.
like the next
Yeah.
leadership. How are you like?
That's all.
That's internal work that we have to do.
Okay, so what time do you think you're gonna go to sleep
Other
tonight?
people are passionate and have
Like
this
ready to go to sleep, so I can come over
Yeah, and
half an hour before that.
contextual as well.
All right, so I would say
Yeah.
10 or 10:30. So if you came over 9 or 9:30.
Have to go back to the forum.
I'm here at the Permanent
I
Forum
was talking
on
with Wendy
Full of
when she stopped over
Afro-Movement, and I
here
just participated
about
earlier
whether I should
today
try
in
to
a
go
roundtable
upstairs when you come.
on ending
Just to see
cultural
what it's
genocide
like,
against
to
people of
see,
African descent, and I just
to see what the stairs are like. I don't even know. I might be able to do 2
gratitude
stairs
for
and
the
that's it.
power
I don't know.
and the energy in that space that was so real and so generative. This is a powerful week, and that week in that space was unlike any other that I've been in this whole
Well, I haven't been doing much in the kitchen. Yeah, well, I mean, I also have the water thing upstairs. I mean, again, I don't know if it's even possible, but I thought at some point I'm gonna have to see because I can't, okay. Yeah, but it doesn't mean we can't fly the 3 steps to see the flag tonight,
George,
but I
mute
won't
David
plan on
Berenson,
staying
mute David
downstairs.
Berenson.
Because I gotta tell you, I cannot get comfortable on the couch.
What if I brought over one of the
Please raise your hand now.
things that we put on the
So wow, that was an interesting dynamic there. Sorry to bore. I guess the video was a little longer than expected and maybe lost the attention of some of our listeners out there today. It's kind of what happened in 2021 after 2020 happened when the world had no choice but to pay attention to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And, it was easy to understand why the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent needed to exist. It was easy to understand why reparations needed to exist and why the school to prison pipeline and why mass incarceration and why these continual transgressions and cultural genocide against African people living here in the US, why it can't be ignored. But in 2021, of course, the world went back to business as usual. And so it was easy to talk over our cries for help. It was easy to ignore uh, our pleas for recognition, to be seen, to not be erased. And of course, legislation made sure that we knew that everything my grandmother did during Jim Crow to be able to receive the right to vote 1965, all the organizing of the Mama Teresas and the Miss George Fridays, that all of that work would be undone. And so after doing the Black Lives Matter and all of the things we did to acknowledge what the world saw, we saw legislation here in the US, or what we call Turtle Island, that made sure we realized how far we hadn't come. So Florida and Idaho and Texas, and I mean, the list goes on and on about why it was illegal for us to teach the history of this country and how we came to be in this condition. And so while our organization, the Teaching Artists Institute, was there at the permanent forum on people of African descent, we made sure we had a side conversation, a parallel conversation with allies in that space, because it's time for us to draw a line in the sand. We can no longer pretend that we're in allyship. We no longer need your signs and your slogans. We need people that are willing to help us do this work. And what the work looks like is shared power, making space at the table. And so the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent was birthed out of the International Decade for People of African Descent: recognition, justice, development. And we realized that 10 years, of course, the International Decade for People of African Descent would end this year. We realized that 10 years was not long enough to unpack, to even begin the recognition of the transgressions, to even begin the recognition of the various types of African people living in the diaspora as Afro descendants. 10 years wasn't even enough to identify the various groups and to recognize those that are as organizations coming forward to bring about the reparatory justice needed to rebalance the earth, to live in harmony with it. And so they've decided that there should be a second decade for people of African descent. And so we realized that we needed to be more clear about what that looked like. We needed to be more clear with the language. And so beyond just recognition, we need reparatory justice. And we need to be clear about saying that reparations are due. And we understand that reparations are not just about the financial contributions of countries and private entities, insurance companies. When we look at insurance adjusters, their models and templates, we look at what are the damages? What is a life worth? When we decide how many people through what we call in my culture the Ma'afa lost their lives in the dreadful Middle Passage, how many people still are being affected by the effects of this system. When we calculate the damages, California now with their reparations task force, they said 800 billion. That was on the low end. They gave the Japanese reparations after World War II. They gave even those that managed the enslavement of my people in the South, the Confederates, they gave them cash money checks. When California, which is the most experienced among us in identifying how best reparations can be paid in this country, they said 800 billion, and you can get this money through taxation. Tax marijuana, recreational marijuana. Let's start there so that we can begin the process of acknowledging, of recognizing here on Turtle Island. And on the front page of the LA Times, they said, we won't give you one penny. One penny. When we look at Evanston in Illinois, I know my time is winding down and the video was quite long. They tried in 2020 to build systemic infrastructure. They created legislation through taxes to begin putting money into reparatory justice, but it's not going to the real people. It's caught up in what we call red tape. And so when it comes to the work of the Teaching Artists Institute, we're creating avenues for the right to return. The right to return is a human right, our ability to return to the land of our origin. So for us, we understand that the United States is a sinking ship. We understand that, and we're not trying to save it. What we're trying to do is create tangible opportunities to repatriate to the land of our origin. And so our conversations are with the African Union. Our conversations are with CARICOM, entities that are interested in creating safe spaces for Black people. And we go to the United Nations to talk about the fact that Black nationhood matters. And so we stand in partnership with the Indigenous brothers and sisters of Turtle Island, understanding that we are the stolen people and this is the stolen land. And we can never forget that very foundational social contract that we pretend doesn't exist. I love the acknowledgement of Don when he first spoke, We're not doing land acknowledgments to people that are no longer here. It's almost as if we walk right over the fact that they're still here with us. And so we work in allyship with them. They partner with us. They acknowledge our plight. They understand that cultural genocide that's happening to us continues to happen to them. And we bring these conversations to the world stage. And the Permanent Forum, this was the third edition of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. And I had the opportunity this April of taking this message to that platform, and I'll continue to do so. And thank you again for giving me an opportunity to speak on some of the ways that we're showing up using art and culture to ensure that my people are not erased.
Don, please introduce Jad.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate all of the work that you've been doing at the UN level and locally. We got to keep going. I will now introduce Jad Oglesby, who is he is a graduate of Case Western Reserve University. I met Jad at a camp out on Case Western Reserve University lawn because colleges were showing their strength. College students were saying no more genocide. And I just met Jad about a month ago, and I went to the people's graduation where Jad delivered a strong speech. There was a people's graduations commencement because they were the graduate students were denied their rights as a commencement. And Jad is the leader of the Students for Justice in Palestine at Case Western Reserve University. Take it away, Jad, please. Thank you.
Hi, yes, hello everyone. Thank you guys for having me here. I am Jad Oglesby, Vice President of Students for Justice in Palestine at Case Western Reserve University. I just recently graduated with a double major in political science and economics and pursuing law school right now. So I was asked to come here and speak on my experience protesting our administration's support of Israel, and particularly to call for our institution to divest. This effort at Case Western Reserve started back in the fall of 2022, where due to the efforts of myself and SJP alongside our Black Student Union and other organizations on campus, we passed Undergraduate Student Government Resolution 31-15, which called for Case Western Reserve University to investigate its investments and assets within corporations that may be proliferating Israel's military or prison industrial complex. So this bill did not call for outright boycott and divestment from Israel itself, but particularly tried to target corporations that funded their military and their prisons. So corporations like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, which contribute greatly to weapons proliferation. In the case of Lockheed Martin, missile development, which are currently being used to level Gaza and create mass destruction and genocide to a degree that we haven't seen in a few decades now. Following the passing of that resolution, President Kaler, who is the current president of Case Western Reserve University, sent an email to all 5,500 students at the time of the undergraduate student body, labeling myself and Students for Justice in Palestine as hateful, naive, anti-Semitic, and bigoted. He released a statement within 12 hours of the resolution being passed, and he targeted and attacked his own students here at Case. And that moment was really in a way, the declaration of war that our administration called against the Palestinian students and the Palestinian identity here at Case Western Reserve. For greater context, I have a dual ethnic background as an African American and a Palestinian. So the values and the principles of social justice, freedom, liberation, and equality run through my veins in a very unique and beautiful way. And I've continued to uphold those values following the passing of that resolution. Since then, we have made great efforts to educate students on campus about the conflict. And leading up to fall 23, where we hosted our very first mass protest in the form of a walkout at our administrative building, which saw 200 plus students walk out of class and congregate in front of the administrative building and to voice their disapproval of our administration's support of Israel and its attacks on the Palestinian identity. Unfortunately, these pleas fell on deaf ears, and due to the escalating nature of the current conflict in Gaza right now, we decided as a student body to hold an encampment, which is a very popular protesting tool used by other students around the nation. If you've been following the news, University of Columbia students used a similar tactic, as well as many other universities. Many universities in California, Northwestern did it, University of Texas did it, University of North Carolina, and many more. And what this called for is students to bring tents and set up a camp in the middle of really the commons of whatever university that takes place. So we employed the same tactic to show a physical resistance and solidarity of the student body and the Cleveland community at large against our administrators' policies of support of Israel's military financially. The result of this encampment was an 11-day effort where students stayed in tents, including myself, for 11 days straight in the middle of Cleveland, many of which had students camping for the very first time, which was both kind of which was pretty humorous, because who would have thought students would be experiencing their first camping trip in the heart of Cleveland. So that was funny, but throughout my experience leading this encampment, right, yeah, it got really cool. Throughout my experience leading this encampment, there were many ups and downs and many lessons that needed to be learned. The very first hurdle being that the administration arrested 22 students within 30 minutes of the encampment being set up. So the administrative felt that students were threatening to campus because they're sitting down in tents, and that led to an aggressive mass arrest of 22 students. This moment sparked media attention, and that came to shed light on the situation. Fortunately, all of those students were released because they couldn't charge them for anything, since they were in fact just sitting in tents. But we continued on with our effort. Through consistent negotiation with administrators, we were able to ensure that the tents could be put up at night, to ensure that students that were staying overnight could be in the tents. Because at first, the reason why they mass arrested everyone is because there was a zero tolerance policy on tents being put up at all. This changed the following day, where administrators would disappear for 6 hours straight, refuse to negotiate with students like myself, the lead organizers who are leading the encampment, which resulted in us deciding to escalate further and allow for both students and community members to stay here and for tents to be put up 24 hours. The question was, did the students who were arrested get to graduate? I was not one of the students to get arrested, yet my degree is being withheld at the moment as we speak. So I did say I graduated with a double major in political science and economics, but technically I haven't gotten my degree quite yet. So we have a legal team working on that. And this is just another tactic that, you know, the administration has used to kind of, as a scare tactic. They're trying to use myself and the other brave students as an example against you for what happens to students who decide to use their First Amendment rights. As long as, you know, individuals like myself stand proud and continue to smile in the face of all this, I think the lesson that will be learned instead, that as long as you stand in solidarity, you can really do anything. And that, as Donna mentioned before, during my People's Commencement speech, I brought up two big concepts. I brought up identity and I brought up legacy as two important principles to be spoken on in this regard. During this time, there were not even counter protesters, community members who decided to protest my commencement, which was also such a ridiculous thing to experience. But nonetheless, I spoke on what it means to be a minority, what it means to be an advocate, and what students here at Case Western Reserve learned when it came to advocacy and when it came to standing up for a moral principle. And the lesson I was learned is that you can pursue your aspirations and still achieve whatever you like to achieve. To point out Eric's point, that is true, but they cannot suspend all First Amendment rights in its entirety. And I think the point of our encampment as well when it comes to the First Amendment is that the university is using its conduct policy in unorthodox ways to silence a particular narrative. Because there are other instances of advocacy and protests that have been conducted at Case Western Reserve, and they were not met with anywhere near the same level of scrutiny as any of the Palestinian protests that have been conducted at Case. At Case Western with this encampment, there was a lot of questions, and we definitely pushed the boundaries of, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with legal terms, but when it comes to protest, for it to be just, there needs to be a time, place, and manner for them to occur. And we stretched the boundaries on some of those, considering the type of protest that was being enacted, which is an encampment, which is inherently a 24-hour protest, pretty much. But with the walkout that I mentioned before, myself and other organizers gave administration a two-week notice. We organized very cordially. We stayed for 2 hours, protested, and we left. And I was still forced into a conduct meeting on a bus on the way to my NCAA tournament. So these kind of things where students didn't really acknowledge, or the Palestinian narrative is just being silenced, and the Palestinian identity on campus is being silenced in a very unorthodox way. The next question, what's the next step in looking? Really just spread light. I guess to kind of conclude my segment, because that's a really good point to end my my part on, is what can we do as both students and community members to help improve the current predicament that I face, as well as just the overall to achieve the goal of why we protested in the first place. And that's ultimately to use your voice and stand in solidarity and try to be brave. Because when it comes to Palestine, Israel in particular, the amount of aggressive tactics used to suppress the Palestinian narrative is unlike anything that has been present before. The only thing I can really see as comparable was during the civil rights era, where the police would utilize actual violence to suppress that movement. However, in the case of this issue, tactics such as doxing, the weaponization of the term anti-Semite, as well as other such tactics that could ruin careers and compromise students and individuals' academic future. As long as we create a support system and use our voice consistently, we are starting to see cracks in the armor when it comes to this issue. I feel like President Biden feels that his campaign is starting to become in jeopardy because of this issue. And I think as long as we continue to use our voice and put pressure and spread awareness about this predicament, I think we'll come out on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Ohio has laws that against boycotting, anti-boycott laws, and Ohio also has a law that says that public universities cannot divest from Israel. So that's a little bit weird. So we got to change all that, of course. Are we going to hear from Dick Peary today a little bit about 1990 when we had the original?
Well,
yes.
I'll tell you, I was, of course, working as a plain dealer reporter at that time. And I have to say, and maybe my colleagues, if they were here, would contradict some of what I'm going to say, but I was virtually the only one on the staff who seemed to enjoy writing about broad international issues and social from the point of view of the oppressed. And so whenever there was a visiting fireman or anything else in town from another country, an official from Tanzania or from Asia, an Asian country, they usually sent me to do it because I was the only one who seemed to not mind the assignment. And so I got a lot of things in the paper, like that story, that it's not likely would have gotten in otherwise. But yeah, I was glad to do that and I felt so good about what Teresa was doing. And most of all, I think that I put the perspective on things that I did like that because I understood the background. That's what most of the reporters did not do. They did not know the background. They did not know the perspective. And so they could only write superficially about a lot of these things. And I was just glad I was there to be able to do it. Yeah. But it was great to see. But most of all, since I got the mic, I also want to say that not only are the students today fantastic, but the future, what they have done with their futures by being demonstrative, no one can guess, but it may be the greatest asset they have 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You may bring things to the table and you may know successes because you sat in and because you established a tent city that are somehow revered and welcomed in a few years. So I just hope that all of the people who are there who feel that they have destroyed something by missing the graduation or getting their names listed on the blacklist that I know are out there, just the opposite may be totally true. And I just be optimistic about it because they're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Always good to have you around. I bump into Dick at some various vigils for some of the slain people by the police, when they shoot down some of the people. I've seen Dick at Tanisha Anderson's vigils and others, of course. Thanks, Dick, for your constant vigilance. We're going to open up to Q&A. If you could just, I'll put myself on gallery view, I believe, so I can see everybody. Or you could lift a hand, raise a hand, if you'd like to ask a question, please, or make a comment.
Somebody wrote something very long in the chat. If he could speak, I think his name is Brian Mallory.
No, that was a answer to a question of mine in the chat. I believe Eric is the author of that. Is that you, Eric, that answered that question?
Yes.
Oh.
Would you care to amplify, sir?
Yeah. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I never know how my audio is going out over Zoom. Brian asked the question about, well, aren't there? Wait, what was the question? Something about
my question
the
is
alumni.
Are there alumni?
Are there any alumni in support of the Palestinian cause at Case?
Yes.
And I wrote probably, but what is operating here is the Case Western Reserve University relationship with the Jewish Federation, which is Israel Lobby, Hillel, which is Israel Lobby, and Zionist alumni. When you look around campus and you see the names on the buildings, you quickly realize how much Zionist money is at play in that campus. And I'll say one thing about that in a second too. Anti-Zionists cannot match that. And since private universities are businesses first and operate accordingly, this is what happens. The greater Cleveland area is the
I'm sorry, Eric. Eric, this is supposed to be cute. Well, I don't know if y'all, if you could tie it up, just wrap it up. Wrap it up, please.
Don, I appreciate Eric's answer. And Eric, I was a mutual ex-member of Ohio PPC, who's a college law professor, late of Toledo, now in Virginia. The dude, for those of y'all who know I'm talking about, reinforced a point that I think was also in the New York Times, how these large endowed universities are basically hedge funds who have a sideline in education. So if you follow who are actually endowing the universities and how they're getting their money, that explains the entire grip of the Zionist or pro-Israeli line. And if you draw a through line to the major donors in the Democratic Party, I'm way out there in left field, y'all. But thank you for drawing that through line, and I'll back up. Thanks, Don.
Oh, Don, you're muted.
I'm muted. Eric, did you want to finish? Gotcha. Did you want to finish your statement, Eric? And then we go to Diane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll go to Diane then. Thanks, Eric and Brian. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Diane.
It's going to be short. I am so proud of the youth today. And I thank God that I'm living to see the youth get involved with what's going on in the world, especially when I was involved with the guys came home from Vietnam, and with civil rights here in Cleveland, Ohio. But I am so proud of the youth today. And thank you again, Don. And thank you again, all of you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Don,
yes.
I just want to reinforce what Dick said about this moment being significant in who the students may become. At 17, when I was at Tuskegee, and I raised my hand in the classroom that day and joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and we went out in Lowndes County registering people to vote with the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. And all of those Black people got kicked off their farms and sharecropping land, and we had to set up a tent city. And Gwen Patton, who some of you may know, I don't know why something Facebook popped up talking about confirm your language is Arabic. I cancel that. But at any rate, when I went back there from 1966 to 2012, Gwen Patton kept telling me, you've got to see, you've got to see. And it's now a national park where we set up the tent city, commemorating what we did with the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which became the first Black Panther Party, registering people to vote. And there I was at 17, and it made me who I am today, coming back into Atlanta, connecting with John Lewis. And so I say to Jad and all the young people at Columbia, at the University of Michigan, everywhere, because when Biden spoke at Morehouse at the commencement on Sunday, it was not pretty. And so people made it clear they're not down with the Israel stuff. So let's keep it going in support of the students, and let's make sure these universities do not do anything dirty to Jad or anybody else. So everybody in Cleveland makes sure nothing happens to Jad and he gets his degree. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yes, thank you, Teresa. And speaking of John Lewis, the proposition, the resolution that he proposed over the years was to talk about reparations, and it's never passed. Can't we just talk about reparations for African Americans?
Well, it was actually John Conyers who passed away. He put out HR 40 in 1986, I think, the first time. But there is a new HR 40 that's done by the Congresswoman from Texas, and is supported in the Senate by the senator from New Jersey. And so it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, because everywhere, all over Georgia, I'm working on an ordinance here in Columbus, Georgia. Columbus is a slave-holding city founded in 1828. Sold slaves down in a part of Columbus. And so in 2028, when the city turns 200, the city manager and everybody is on notice. Reparations now, mainly focused on housing. Thank
you.
Go ahead, Dick.
Don. Yeah, Don, I just had a question about us. I got a lot of things to say, but I won't say them. Don't worry. But one thing about the protests that are on the campuses that are bringing out the best in so many young people, just like the anti-war movement did and the civil rights movement did. I wanted to wonder, we see the Palestinians being subjected to a process of genocidal ethnic cleansing and starvation and all. And yet there are other people starving in the world. What's going on in Sudan, probably orchestrated by the West, I'm sure, has already led to mass starvation. And what's going on in so many other places is happening. And I haven't seen any linkage of the Palestinian genocide with these other forms of destruction of people that are taking place in Africa. And I just wonder if there isn't a way to link the two in order to create a much better understanding of this worldwide march toward fascism that we're living with. And that's just a question or an idea I want to throw out there. I don't have the answer, but I just can't say that one's important and the other should be ignored. I want to know how they can all be linked as a part of the same process that we have to oppose everywhere or lose it everywhere.
Well, the women's, let me just say this quickly. The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom internationally with sections all over the world is making the link because the Middle East, North Africa region is talking about what's going on. And it is really important. There's going to be a Palestine Nakba webinar that will happen on May 23rd, but it's going to be in the afternoon. So it's 7 p.m. Central European time. So for us on the East Coast, it will be 1 p.m. And George Friday will make sure that everyone has the registration link to hear from the Palestinian and Lebanese women. And then you can ask your questions too. That important question you just asked it, because wealth, in my view, is the key in terms of the feminist peacemaking and asking for peace and security. 1325, that resolution that the UN passed, specifically aimed at women living in the war zones. So there is work being done through the UN and through other avenues to make the connection, because the women and children are the first casualties. And so we need to stop the madness. Thank you. And Brian has his hand up.
Yep, and we have a hard stop at 8:30. Brian, go for it.
Yeah, Dick, I want to just thank you for bringing that up. But I wanted to point out that in this current Gaza conflict, let's not forget the role that South Africa has played in terms of bringing their case on behalf of the Palestinians before the ICC, as well as just the idea of connecting colonialism, imperialism, the war economy, systemic racism, and all of that. We look at the situation in Darfur. You've got the situation in the Sahel that has not gotten as much American media. And as a person of African descent, I'm very concerned about that. And I just will throw out, since I'm throwing out random stuff across the continent, I don't know if we did have a little piece of good news in all of this. This past week, Stevie Wonder, who turned 74, major celebration and a major icon in Pan-Africanism, was granted dual citizenship with Ghana. And for those who know Stevie's history, before Garfunkel and Maza got together, before Peter Gabriel and World of Music and Dance, what we call now Afrobeat, Stevie was over there in the mid-70s, immersing himself, meeting the musicians and the cultural artists, the political artists in the medium of music, promoting, unity among the African diaspora. So I just wanted to just throw that out there. And the idea that that man has been making music for 6 decades and is truly an eighth wonder of the world and has never given up on his activism, his philanthropy, and his willingness to be a citizen of the world. Thank you.
Thanks for those last words, Brian. Appreciate that. Should we close out, Teresa?
Could we allow for any announcements that people may have? I just want to say that the Southern Anti-Racism Network is celebrating our 25th anniversary with 2 events, one in Columbus, Georgia, at our headquarters, and one in Atlanta. George, if you could drop the website in the chat so that people can see what we've been doing. This 2-stop tour is sponsored by the Southern Anti-Racism Network. So looking forward to seeing some of you, I hope, on Thursday when we do the Michigan stop, where there will be a student from the University of Michigan, and they're suffering the same kind of repression that Jad talked about. And we'll have Alan Haber speaking, who's the founder of Students for a Democratic Society. and he's in his late 80s now. So it's going to be very important if you can join the Michigan stop, which is going to be Thursday, May 23rd, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. And the We the People Amendment, could somebody say what that is?
I don't know.
Yes,
I-
I can say
I
something.
can.
I-
Oh, anybody else?
Yeah, I actually had a speech planned for today.
Oh,
I thought we were gonna do that, but that's okay. I'll just be really short on
I'm
this.
so sorry, Sandy. There was a lack of
I
communication.
guess I got my message crossed. I thought I was giving a little talk, but I'll
Okay.
do my 10-minute speech down about 30 seconds. Sorry for the people actually, if you're international people, you want to hear this too. This is how the United States works. In the United States, the Supreme Court has judged corporations as people, which is why they are so darn powerful. It's not that Americans aren't trying. So many of us, as you can see on this call, are. But it's really difficult when these corporations own the courts, they own the press, they own everything you can imagine. But we still keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And one thing we're pushing for is reverse this by saying that corporations are not people. We've got the Move to Amend has the, I've got the wrong background there, sorry. Move to Amend has this petition that I put in the chat. And the idea is that, just one second here. Sorry. There we go. The idea is that we will have that we amend the Constitution to say corporations not people and they can't use their money to as First Amendment rights. It's much more complicated than that, but I put a couple of videos that'll explain it super well. And but even if whatever you're doing, keep doing that. But consider Move to Amend if you've got an address in the United States. And because every signature is more important than even money, although we can use that too, but it's really the signatures, because then we go to your representatives and say X amount of your people want you to support the We the People Amendment. It's in Congress, but the only people who can really go for it are those who are not dependent on big money. So we got the cool people and behind us, the others are too afraid, and this country cannot survive this way with money leading everything. That's in a nutshell. Please check out those links. I really appreciate hearing everybody tonight. I learned a lot and enjoyed the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. And I
You
still
are
have
awesome.
my pen.
Good
I
job.
still have my pen. I moved them in.
Thank you.
All right, you all. Thank you for joining tonight, and I apologize to Sandy for not including you in the speakers lineup. I missed that.
Oh, that's okay. The other speeches were good. By the way, if you do sign up for Move to Amend now, you'll hear about a thing that's a lot of you are from Ohio, apparently. You'll hear about an action we have at the State House to dissolve First Energy. So sign up for Move to Amend if you haven't already, and you'll get that information or contact me.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay,
all. I see Alec changed his name to Sasha, but okay, we're good. Hey, have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Justice,
Thank
free
you, Don.
Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. Good night.